Howdy folks, I do hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles. In today's return to World of Warships, we're going to be following the adventures of Admiral 30 here in the US Navy Tier 10 battleship, the USS Vermont. This is a Tier 10 arms race battle on the mountain range map. A few words of explanation for what it is that you're about to witness. Because this is a Tier 10 battle, although there are plenty of Tier 9s and 8s as well, but it means that there are a lot of hit points available to be farmed on both teams, for everyone involved. Slightly more significantly, however, this is a Tier 10 arms race battle, so for those of you who don't understand exactly what that entails, scattered around the map there are various buffs that can be captured by any member of your team who's inside the buff circle when the buff goes live. You can see a couple of them over there with the countdown timers ticking away. What happens when a teammate gets one of those buffs for the team varies depending on what the buff is, but some of those buffs can be a permanent slow heal that ticks over, replenishing your health, or buffs to your maximum amount of health, as well as firepower buffs and reload buffs and so on and so on and so on. So even more so than in a regular Tier 10 battle, in a Tier 10 arms race battle, the teams can be populated with ships, depending on the buffs that the teams have acquired, ships that have way more health than they should, and ships that are repairing way more health than they should. All of which means that in a Tier 10 arms race battle, there are opportunities to farm monstrous amounts of damage. Of course, the usual disclaimers apply. In order for that to happen, you need to be able to shoot straight and stay alive for as long as possible. All of which brings us to the hero of today's video, Admiral 30 here, in the USS Vermont, which I believe, unless I'm very much mistaken, still has the heaviest broadside in World of Warships. And it's not because it has the biggest guns, and yeah, that first salvo completely missed. I mean, it has big guns, 457mm or 18-inch. But there are ships with bigger guns than this. At Tier 10, 457mm guns are not actually anything that special. It just has a lot of them. 12. Yes, the Yamatos are bigger. Yes, the Shikoshimas are bigger, but they only have 6 and 9 guns each. The Vermont has 12. 12 guns that fire super heavy 18-inch armor piercing shells. And when they hit, they do things like that. The downside, of course, is the horrendously slow reload. Well, actually, there are a lot of downsides to the Vermont, but that's the only real downside to the guns, a 40-second reload. But when you're hitting as hard as this, and that, by the way, wasn't a particularly hard hit, plenty of Tier 10 battleships can do that kind of damage if they score a single Citadel. But when you are hitting as hard as that, with as many guns as this, I think a 40-second reload is a fair trade. Oh, and I did want to add another disclaimer to the start of this video, but we'll just wait and see what happens to this salvo against, yep. 60,000 damage. Yeah, you better heal that up, son. Yeah, aside from this being arms race, and therefore there's a lot more health to be farmed on the enemy team, the enemy team in this particular arms race battle really seem to love sailing around giving flat broadside to the USS Vermont. Watch the Georgia. Yep, pop goes the weasel. He's up to 130,000 damage already. And I think he's only fired the guns 4 times. So, yeah, the guns on this thing are amazing. They're really the ship's only saving grace, because everything else about the ship is terrible. I think it's safe to say that the Vermont is a terrible ship that has very good guns. And I'd rather have a terrible ship that has very good guns than a good ship that has terrible guns. Oh, hello, Gneisenau. Didn't see you there. Fancy seeing you again. I know I give the Gneisenau a lot of stick, but it deserves it, and it's not alone in the German battleship line. Another 20,000 damage, just casually, you know. I mean, there are plenty of German battleships that are great ships, but the guns absolutely suck. I mean, you could argue the Bismarck, although the Bismarck's not that bad. The Frederick the Great, the Grosse Kurfürst. I mean, if those ships didn't have great secondaries, there just wouldn't be any point in playing them. And it's probably no surprise that the new German battleship / battle cruiser line features very, very good guns. Oh my god, what is this cruiser doing? You're gonna regret that. There it is. Oh, Lord have mercy. I should probably point out, by the way, because it's only fair, the great work being done by the friendly Gearing, the destroyer, who got the first blood by getting an early kill on the enemy Halland, and has basically had free reign to spot all of these clown shoes ever since. Without that Gearing, and to a lesser degree the Austin that Anima 30 is divisioned up with, who has now just died. Okay, so without that Gearing, basically Anima 30 wouldn't have had anything to shoot at, and wouldn't be racking up cricket scores like that against broadsiding battleships and cruisers that really should know better by now. Oh, speaking of which, here we go. How many more Citadels do you reckon he's going to get here? Oh, his gun's on, even pointing this way. I'm going to have to sing this myself, otherwise I'll get copyright claimed. Uchu Senkan Yama. No.
Enemy battleship sunk.
You're welcome. It's more than 250,000 damage done. A lot of that, of course, is thanks to the arms race buffs, with enemy ships that are constantly healing, and ships that have received health buffs. But a lot of it is also down to clown shoes like them, constantly sailing around giving flat broadside to the battleship with the heaviest broadside in the game. And it's a good job the Vermont has this firepower, because if it didn't have the firepower it would have nothing. Everything else about this ship sucks. I can remember when Wargaming were talking about introducing this new American battleship line. I thought, ooh, that sounds interesting. What kind of ships are we going to get? Because grinding through the American battleship line, when you're going up through the standard class battleships, the New York, the New Mexico, the Colorado, was kind of painful because of the speed. I mean, the Colorado wasn't that bad because it at least got 16-inch guns, but the New Mexico was terrible. The New York, I don't know, I kind of enjoyed the New York. Probably because it was tier 5 and the competition wasn't that hard. But it's not a very good ship. And it's all to do with the speed. Chugging along at 20 knots is nobody's idea of fun. So once you manage to get to tier 8 and unlock the North Carolina, which isn't that fast, it's got a top speed of 28 knots, but it was party time compared to the New York, the New Mexico and the Colorado. And then it only got better with the Iowa, and of course at tier 10, the Montana. So, new American battleships, what are they going to be like? They're going to be standard class battleships. Tillman designs. They're going to be what? I mean, a continuation of those absolute turds that we had to play through at tier 5, 6 and 7. Who thought that was a good idea? I certainly didn't. And yet, while the USS Kansas is just an abomination, the Minnesota isn't that bad. The Vermont works, even though I never expected it to, because on paper, I mean, it's slow, it's huge, it's fat and wide, its superstructure is massive, it's basically a massive floating armor-piercing and in particular high explosive shell catcher. And yet, those 12, 18-inch guns, even though they have a 40-second reload, they're what makes this ship work. That does come with a couple of disclaimers of its own, however. I mean, you can do extraordinarily well in the Vermont. I mean, look at this, 300,000 damage. But, there's always a but. This ship is very dependent on, I mean, I want to say the rest of your team, and I wouldn't be wrong saying that, but it's also dependent on the enemy team. Your team have to be not quite as shit as the enemy team. Providing your team are winning and you can keep the momentum going, which is basically what's happening here to Enema 30, then the Vermont can be an unstoppable juggernaut of a battleship. If your team are not winning or do not have the advantage, it's not impossible to carry in the Vermont, it's just really, really hard. Because you have to make an early impact, and that's hard to do when you have a top speed of 23 knots. So if you are in the Vermont and you do find yourself in the situation where your teammates are the ones dropping like flies and you're probably going to be next, if you're in a North Carolina, an Iowa, a Massachusetts, a Montana, you have options. You can stop shooting, you can go undetected, you can motor on out of there and start kiting away. But if you're in the Vermont with a top speed of 23 knots and a surface detectability range that means you can be spotted from low Earth orbit, you're not going anywhere in a hurry, and that's probably the hill that you're going to die on. But if you are able to make an early impact and lead your team of donkeys, and provided you don't have a team of lions who just rush forward and slaughter everything before you can even bring your guns to bear, or get to within firing range, leaving you playing catch-up for the rest of the game, well, as you can see from Anima 30's example here, and his 360,000 damage, the Vermont can kick arse. However, while I by no means think the Vermont is a bad ship, I do think the Vermont is a bad ship. I said it earlier. It's a terrible ship with amazing guns. But it's not the ship for me. I don't have a Vermont. In fact, I don't have a Minnesota. I don't have a Kansas. Because the idea of playing through the Kansas just saps my will to live. I'd like to have a Vermont, I just don't want to have to put the effort in required to get one. But if you like the look of this thing, and you can put up with the Kansas, which is an utter turd of a ship, by the way. I mean, it's everything that's bad about the Vermont without everything that's good about the Vermont. It's heavily armed, it's got 12 16-inch guns, but they couldn't hit the side of a barn from the inside. It's got a serious case of the Gneisenau's going on. The Minnesota at tier 9 isn't bad, but the Vermont at tier 10 is where it's at. With Anima 30 here, up to 410,000 damage done. And the only reason he doesn't get any more is because the enemy team ran out of points. Anima 30 with 417,000 damage done and 3,500 base experience. Yes, that is the world damage record in this ship across every server. Made possible, of course, by the fact that this was an arms race battle. He had a nice aggressive team, his shooting was pretty good, and he had an extremely accommodating enemy team who just loved sailing around giving flat broadside to his 12 18-inch guns. All of which, of course, resulted in 417,000 damage and 3,500 base experience. Anima 30, congratulations. Everyone else, I hope you enjoyed it, because that is it for today. And as always, take care, stay safe, and I'll catch you next time.